Whispers of the Forgotten. On a crisp autumn evening, when the sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the forgotten paths of the town, Adrian felt something strange stir within him. There was a feeling in the air, an electric hum, like the world itself was waiting for something to happen. And something was happening, though Adrian couldn't put his finger on it. He stood outside his modest home, his eyes fixed on the horizon, where the last remnants of daylight struggled to hold on. The trees swayed gently, their branches reaching out like hands, twisting and curling with the wind. The scent of damp earth clung to the air, mingling with the faint smell of wood smoke from nearby chimneys. Adrian had never been one to trust his instincts, but today something felt different. Something was calling him, beckoning him toward an unknown path. As he turned to head back inside, a figure appeared from the edge of the forest, where the shadows grew darker. His heart skipped a beat. It was Theo, his best friend, though there was something off about him today, something distant in his eyes. Adrian waved, but Theo didn't respond. He merely walked toward him with purpose, his gaze fixed straight ahead, as though he hadn't seen him at all. Adrian felt a shiver run down his spine.
Theo?
Adrian called out, his voice tight with unease. "What's wrong? Where have you been?" Theo stopped just a few feet away from him, his eyes still unblinking, his face pale as if drained of life. There was an eerie stillness about him. "I need your help," Theo said, his voice a hollow whisper, barely audible above the wind. "I can't do this alone." Adrian took a step forward, feeling his heart race. "Do what? What's going on?" But Theo didn't answer. Instead, he turned, his movements robotic, as though something else entirely was guiding him. Adrian hesitated for only a moment before following. It wasn't like Theo to be so cryptic, to act so distant. He needed to understand. They walked in silence, deeper into the forest, the trees growing thicker around them. The wind howled, branches creaking as if the forest itself was alive, watching them. Adrian's steps quickened, fear creeping up his spine as he struggled to keep pace with his friend. Eventually, they reached a clearing. The air grew thick, heavy, and Adrian could feel his breath catch in his chest. At the center of the clearing was an ancient stone well, its surface cracked and weathered by centuries of neglect. Strange symbols were carved into its stones, symbols Adrian didn't recognize. Theo stood in front of the well, his hands trembling. "This is where it all began," he said, his voice breaking. "The promises we made, the ones we didn't keep." Adrian furrowed his brow, unsure of what his friend was talking about. He had always known Theo to be a practical person, not given to flights of fancy. But the Theo standing before him was someone else, someone broken. "What do you mean?" Adrian asked, taking another step forward. Theo's gaze shifted toward the ground, his face contorting with pain. "There was a pact. A long time ago, when we were kids, we swore we would help each other no matter what. But I broke that promise. I failed you." Adrian's mind raced. He remembered the promise they had made years ago, during the days when they played together in the woods, fearless and free. Back then, nothing seemed impossible. "What do you mean, Theo? You didn't break any promise. You've always been there for me." Theo looked up, his eyes dark with guilt. "I did something that changed everything. And now it's too late to undo it." Adrian felt his pulse quicken. "What are you talking about?" Theo took a deep breath, the weight of his words choking him. "There's something wrong with the well. It's a gateway, Adrian. A doorway to another world, a world that's tied to us. And he stopped, swallowing hard, his hands clenched into fists. "I opened it." The words hung in the air like a heavy fog, suffocating Adrian with their meaning. He shook his head, disbelieving. "What do you mean you opened it?" "Theo, this is crazy. There's no such thing as gateways." Theo's face twisted in anguish. "You don't understand. I didn't mean to, but I did. And now something is coming for us. It's too late to stop it." The wind kicked up again, rustling through the trees like whispers of voices long forgotten. Adrian could feel the weight of the words pressing against his chest. His mind reeled, struggling to grasp what his friend was saying. But Theo was no longer looking at him. His eyes were fixed on the well, his body shaking. Adrian stepped closer, his heart pounding. "Theo, what have you done?" Theo turned to face him, his eyes wild with fear. "I opened the door to the other side, but I didn't know what was on the other side. Now, whatever it is, it wants to take us." Adrian felt a cold chill run through him. His instincts told him to run, to leave this place and never look back, but something stopped him. He had made a promise, and that promise had never been more important than it was right now. "We can fix this," Adrian said, trying to steady his voice. "We can close the door. We can undo what you did." Theo shook his head violently. "It's too late for that. Once it's open, it can never truly be closed. Not without a sacrifice." A shiver ran down Adrian's spine. "A sacrifice?" Theo nodded, his gaze distant. "Yes. One of us has to stay on the other side, to keep the balance." Adrian felt his stomach twist. This couldn't be happening. It had to be some kind of nightmare, something he could wake up from. But the look on Theo's face, the desperation, the fear, told him this was real. Whatever was coming, it was real. "I'll do it," Adrian said, before his mind could even catch up with his words. "I'll stay. I'll close the door for both of us." Theo's eyes widened, panic flashing across his face. "No, you can't." But Adrian was already walking toward the well. The ground seemed to tremble beneath his feet, and the air grew thick with an unnatural force. Shadows curled around them like tendrils, reaching, pulling, as though the world itself were trying to drag them into its depths. "Adrian, don't!" Theo cried out, but it was too late. Adrian had already crossed the threshold, stepping into the darkness. Everything went black. When Adrian opened his eyes again, he was no longer in the forest. The world around him was something else entirely, something otherworldly. The sky was a swirling mass of colors that didn't belong to the world he knew. The ground beneath him was soft and spongy, like he was standing on something alive. Shadows moved around him, creatures that he could only glimpse out of the corner of his eye. The air was thick, humid, and filled with whispers that made his skin crawl. Adrian's heart raced, but his mind remained calm. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. He didn't know how, but he would find a way to close the door. But then, out of the shadows, a figure stepped forward. Theo, but not the Theo Adrian knew. This Theo was different. His eyes glowed with an eerie light, his face twisted in an almost unrecognizable mask of anguish. "You shouldn't have come," Theo said, his voice echoing strangely in the air. "It's too late for us both." Adrian stepped back, his pulse quickening. "What do you mean?" The other Theo smiled, but it wasn't a smile that belonged to a friend. It was a smile filled with malice and regret. "You should have stayed. Now we both have to pay the price." A low rumble echoed through the air, and Adrian felt the ground beneath him begin to shift. Something was coming, something far worse than anything he had ever imagined. In the distance, the well began to glow, its surface rippling with an otherworldly light. Adrian knew it was calling him back, but he couldn't turn away. He had made a promise, and he would keep it no matter the cost. The town was never the same after that night. No one spoke of what had happened in the forest, and the well was abandoned, its dark history buried beneath the earth. But some things never truly stay buried. Every year, when the trees began to turn gold and crimson, whispers of the forgotten promise would stir in the wind. And somewhere in the shadows, Adrian and Theo, bound by a pact neither of them could break, would wait. The story of their sacrifice would remain a warning, a lesson that sometimes promises come with a price. And no matter how hard you try to escape it, the past will always find its way back to you.
whispering echoes